That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to the Tagesspiegel House and an equally warm welcome to everyone joining us via live stream. My name is Nicolas Köhn, I'm CEO of Tagesspiegel Verlag. It's great to have you all here with us digitally and in person. A new half year of European responsibility has begun, and here we are just already on the second day of the Irish presidency, having exactly the conversations this moment calls for. The Health4EU Presidency talk is no coincidence. It's a deliberate signal. Health policy belongs at the heart of the European agenda, and it belongs to the public debate. Security of supply, digitalization, cross-border research funding, the Biotech Act. These are not just abstract Brussels topics, but questions that directly affect the lives of millions of people in Europe. The pandemic made painfully clear what happens when Europe fails to find common answers. That is precisely why we have brought together exactly the people that the conversation needs today. We are particularly pleased that the Ambassador of Ireland, Her Excellency, Maeve Collins, is here in person today. And from Dublin, we welcome furthermore Maurice O'Connor, representing the country that holds the EU Council's presidency since yesterday. From Berlin and Brussels, we are joined by Dr. Georg Kippels, Parliamentary State Secretary, here you are, at the German Federal Ministry of Health. Professor Veronika von Messling from the Federal Ministry of Research, Technology and Space. Dr. Florika Fink-Hoyer, Director General of Health, Emergency Preparedness and Response Authority of the European Commission, and Thomas von Kang from DG Santi of the European Commission. Christian Thoms of Johnson & Johnson Germany brings the perspective of those who translate policy into practice, and Dr. Stefan Koch, CEO of Klosterfrau Group, will draw the threads of the evening together. We are truly honored to have you all here today. The Tagesspiegel sees itself as a place where important societal questions and debates are debated in public. The Health4EU platform embodies exactly that conviction. European health policies need sustainable dialogue across legislative terms and across borders. My sincere thanks go to Dorothee Brackmann and Pharma Deutschland for their partnership. Events like this simply would not be possible without a partner like them. And equally to Ruth Ziesinger and our event team for shaping tonight's program. And finally, before we start into the discussion, I have the honor of announcing the date for the next major Health4EU conference. It has now been set. I look forward to seeing you again on April 8th, 2027 at Bolle Festseele in Berlin. The questions are on the table, the right people are in the room. Let's start the discussion and start with a warm welcome to the moderation for today, Ruth Ziesinger.
Nicolas Köhn, thank you very much for your welcoming remarks and for this kickoff for our Health4EU Presidency talk. And a very warm welcome from me as well to you, dear guests here at the Tagesspiegel, and to all our viewers watching the live stream. My name is Ruth Ziesinger, and it is my great pleasure to moderate the Health4EU Presidency talk tonight. We will talk about health in Europe in terms of security of supply for its citizens, in terms of competitiveness and resilience, and as a central future topic for Europe as a whole. And to get you all in the mood for what is at stake here and to set the stage for further fruitful discussions, I'm very happy to welcome Dorothee Brackmann, Chief Executive of Pharma Deutschland, to join me on the stage. Well, that would have been your presentation, but I think your entrance was impressive enough already. Dorothee Brackmann, this is the second time the Tagesspiegel could create, together with you, such a high-level platform to discuss European health, security, and pharmaceutical policy. What motivated you, as Chief Executive of Pharma Deutschland, to bring people together like this?
So first of all, warm welcome, everybody. Warm welcome to Berlin. Warm welcome to our first Health Presidency talk. I think it's exactly the right time to do it. First of all, again, congrats to Ireland. exciting month ahead of you. And exactly. And I think it's super important that we are talking because we are facing a lot of challenges, opportunities as well, but a lot of challenges because we are facing a lot of competition coming from China, coming from Asia Pacific regarding generics, and now from the US regarding innovation, right? And the race for investments already started. So there are a lot of topics we can talk about today, and it's always good to have a dialogue, talking with each other than about each other, so I think it's the perfect day to do that.
Yeah, you mentioned already the pressure which is coming from the US and the rapidly growing manufacturing capacity in China. What does this mean for Europe as a key pharmaceutical and healthcare hub?
Well, there's additional competition, right? The world is changing dramatically. We have a totally different world than we had 2 years ago, and it keeps a lot of pressure to the pharmaceutical industry, that's for sure, right? And the good news is I think Europe faces clearly what's happening right now in the world, and there are some very good initiatives coming from Europe, like the Critical Medicine Act or the Biotech Act, and I think these are the right signals, and of course we can talk about the details here, right? But I think we need more of that to make clear that we are, or we want to be back on track to be world's leader in life science. Yeah,
you mentioned already where you see EU policymaker actually getting it right or going into the right direction from your perspective. I think it would be nice to kick off the evening on a sort of really constructive note. So where would you see Europe's strength to build on?
Well, I think we are on the right track, right? We're doing the right things. And I think it would be nice if we can send a strong and loud and bold signal into the world that Europe is coming back again, right? That we are the head of the world regarding pharma and regarding life science. There is a way to go, I know, but I think if we do it together, and that's why we are here tonight, and with the effort from everybody, I think it's the right way to do, right? We can talk about the details, of course, but Europe is doing a lot of right things.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, we are going to talk about the details later. Thank you very much for this opening dialogue.
Thank you so much.
Dorothee Brackmann, that's your applause. And dear guests, let me briefly tell you what the program awaits for you tonight. We will have 2 sections. In the first, we will focus on security of supply and resilience. We will hear keynotes from Maurice O'Connor, Assistant Secretary in the Department of Health of Ireland, and from Dr. Georg Kippels. Here you are, Parliamentary State Secretary at the German Federal Ministry of Health. And now I see you, Dr. Fink Hoyer. You are the Director General of HERA, which is the Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Authority of the European Commission. Later on, you and Maurice O'Connor, you will engage in a moderated dialogue, which will go up until, I think, 7:10. And during the second part of the evening, we will focus on innovation and regulation, specifically on the Biotech Act. We will hear keynotes from Professor Veronika von Messling. She's Director General of the Health and Life Sciences Division at the German Federal Ministry of Research, Technology and Space, and from Thomas van Kang, Deputy Head of Unit at DG Santé of the European Commission, and they will be joined then in discussion by Christian Thams, Head of Government Affairs and Policy at Johnson & Johnson Germany. A bit after 8, Dr. Stefan Koch, CEO of the Klosterfrau Group, will wrap up the evening for us. And now, without further ado, please welcome to the stage Maurice O'Connor. Can I just say a few words to you as well, and introduce you, because you're not only the Assistant Secretary in the Department of Health of Ireland, you took on that position more than 10 years ago. So I really think you're very experienced in all the topics we will discuss tonight. So thank you very much for being here, and tell us all about the presidency and what your plans are, and congratulations on it again.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, it is a great pleasure to address you here in Germany today and to be among partners and colleagues who share with Ireland a deep and enduring commitment to the European project. Thank you to Tagesspiegel and to Pharma Deutschland for hosting this Health4EU Presidency talk and for bringing together such an important group of voices from government, from European institutions, industry and the wider health community. Ireland assumes the presidency of the Council of the European Union at a time when the need for and the value of European unity has rarely been clearer, and the need for more effective EU coordination has never been so vital. In that spirit, our presidency is guided by the old Irish proverb, Ní nart go cur le chéile, and literally this means that strength comes from working together, and we will use our presidency to work with all our European colleagues on three interconnected EU priorities: competitiveness, values and security. These are not separate ambitions, they are complementary and mutually supportive priorities that will shape how Europe responds to the current global uncertainty, how we strengthen our economic and societal resilience, and how we protect the health and well-being of all our citizens. In health, these priorities come together very clearly, and Ireland's health presidency theme is that investing in health will enable competitiveness. That means recognising health not only as a fundamental value, but also as a strategic asset for Europe. Strong health systems support resilient societies, they support productive economies, they support innovation, and crucially, they support public confidence in Europe's ability to protect and to deliver for our citizens. Nowhere is that more evident than in the issues we are discussing here in this session: the security of supply and the resilience of medicines and pharmaceutical products. For Ireland, this is not an abstract policy question. As a small member state, we understand the challenge of ensuring that patients can continue to access the medicines they need when they need them and at a price that is sustainable for health systems. We also recognise that the environment in which we are making these decisions has changed. The pandemic exposed fragilities in global supply chains. Geopolitical tensions have sharpened concerns about dependency, about market concentration and strategic autonomy. Recent international developments, including debates on pharmaceutical pricing and trade policy, have added further uncertainty to European markets and for member states' access strategies. Ireland's view is that Europe must respond calmly, collectively and strategically, but with urgency and with resolve. Instead of a knee-jerk reaction, we should regard this as an opportunity to design approaches that protect patients, that support innovation, maintain public expenditure, and strengthen Europe's long-term resilience. So Europe must be a place where innovation can happen, and just as importantly, where the outcomes of that innovation can reach patients. The Irish presidency will focus our efforts on enhancing the competitiveness of the EU economy, safeguarding the values of the Union, both at home and abroad, and ensuring the security of our Union and of our citizens. This reflects the pillars of the EU strategic agenda for 2024 to 2029. All of us in this room know and understand how central health is to these three high-level goals of security, values, and competitiveness. The health and well-being of our people is vital to our security. This speaks to the importance of physical and mental health in promoting resilience and well-being at all levels, and also to the importance of reliable access to critical medicines and medical equipment and devices. Europe has real strengths in the area of healthcare and the life sciences, and one of the main strengths is our concern for the health of all of our people. This commitment to universal health and well-being is one of our collective defining values and is a core strength of ours in the EU. Member states have responsibility, of course, for their own health policies and procurements, but we generally purchase medicines at national scale, and we all plan for the health and well-being of our full populations. Working together, we can strengthen our capacity to continue to improve the health and well-being of all people across our union. Again, I know I am preaching to the converted in emphasising how central healthcare is to our competitiveness in the EU. our central health theme for the Irish presidency, is that health and competitiveness are mutually reinforcing. This is not only in the obvious sense that a healthy population is a population that is more actively engaged economically, socially, and within their communities. It is also a recognition that our health systems are the critical foundation for our life sciences and for our pharmaceutical industries. We must connect resilience with innovation. Europe cannot build pharmaceutical resilience if it is not also a competitive location for life sciences, for clinical trials, biotechnology, advanced therapies, medicines development, and manufacturing. This is why Ireland intends to move forward swiftly on the Biotech Act. We welcome it as a timely and ambitious initiative, and one that aligns closely with our presidency theme of investing in health to enable competitiveness. Clinical trials will be an early focus in this area. They are central to innovation and to ensuring that citizens across Europe can access cutting-edge treatments. During our presidency, we will aim to make maximum progress on the Biotech regulation, while also standing ready to take forward the Biotech Act directive into trilogue negotiations once the European Parliament is ready with its position. We will also work ambitiously on the simplification of medical devices and in vitro diagnostics regulations. This is an important part of making Europe a more predictable and attractive environment for innovation, while maintaining the high standards of patient safety and public confidence on which our systems depend. This agenda is highly relevant nationally in Ireland, and I know it is here in Germany and across the Union. As if we didn't have enough to do, we are currently developing a national life sciences strategy reflecting the importance of a sector that employs over 100,000 people in Ireland and combines a strong indigenous base, major multinational presence, and a world-class research ecosystem. The message from our engagement with our life sciences industry in Ireland has been very clear. Europe needs faster, more predictable pathways for regulation, access, adoption, and reimbursement. And innovation only delivers value if it reaches patients. We regard the European health data space as foundational both to the delivery of integrated timely healthcare and as the basis for a step change in the scale and strength of clinical trials and of health research across the EU. In our presidency, we want to focus on innovation not just in the laboratory and in medical research, but also in the real world at community level. Our presidency will highlight evidence-based prevention strategies and innovation in community care to keep people safe and well in their homes and in their communities, and to address health inequalities across our societies. As I mentioned earlier, Ireland approaches this presidency as an opportunity for partnership and as an opportunity to deliver tangible value for our citizens and for our enterprises on the back of the regulatory reform that we have progressed together in Europe over recent years. We want a Europe that is resilient but open, competitive but patient-centred, innovative and sustainable, strategically autonomous but internationally connected and engaged. We want to support practical cooperation that helps member states respond to shortages, manage uncertainty, and secure access to medicines. We want to strengthen EU cooperation and the wider health union. We want to advance the life sciences and the biotech agenda in a way that supports research, manufacturing, clinical trials, and patient access. And above all, we want to keep patients at the centre, because security of supply is not ultimately about supply chains, procurement models, or regulatory files. It is about whether a patient can receive the medicine they need. It is about whether a health system can plan with confidence and certainty. It is about whether Europe can protect its citizens in a more uncertain world and sustain the remarkable improvements in life expectancy and in the quality of life that we have achieved for our people since the foundation of the EU. In a world of uncertainty, our shared commitment to cooperation, solidarity, and progress remains our greatest strength. This is the spirit in which Ireland will approach its presidency, and we look forward to working closely with Germany and with all our EU partners in progressing this vital work. I thank you once again for the opportunity to be here and to learn from you all in taking this agenda forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maurice O'Connor. That was a great keynote to start off this evening. And thank you very much also for mentioning the core values on which the European Union is built and why we are doing all this. So thank you very much. And now please welcome to the stage for our second keynote, Dr. Georg Kippels. Dr. Kippels, you are Parliamentary State Secretary at the Federal Ministry of Health. You have been a member of the Bundestag for the Christian Democrats since 2013, yes. I think. And in Parliament, you have focused, among other topics, on health policy and international cooperation, including work connected to global health issues. So we are really looking forward on your thoughts about the Ireland's EU Council presidency and how it will advance European health resilience. Thank you very much.
Dear Ambassador Collins, dear Director General Dr. Finkoya, dear Assistant Secretary O'Connor, esteemed ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to congratulate you, Ambassador Collins and Assistant Secretary O'Connor, on the start of your EU Council presidency, and I wish you every success in your endeavors in the upcoming 6 months. At a crucial time, we have great responsibility to advance important EU projects in the health sector, and as a member states, we shall support you in every way possible. We very much welcome the Irish priorities. We value the fact that you are prioritizing enhancing competitiveness of the European Union and security in your presidency program. In view of the current geopolitical situation and the many crises facing Europe and the world, we need a more competitive, resilient, and autonomous European Union. Resilience corresponds to health in many different ways, including in particular the safe supply of medical products and medical devices. Supply must not depend on fragile supply chains or production sites in third countries. Europe needs to become more attractive as a location for the manufacturing of medicinal products and their active substances, as well as medical devices. With the Critical Medicine Act, the EU has recently taken an important step toward this goal. However, we would have liked to see even more effective incentives for manufacturers producing in Europe in order to reduce critical dependencies. We are grateful, though, for the speedy negotiations of this file. Now, the implementation shall be our shared effort. Moreover, resilience also means strengthening innovation and competitiveness. In this context, I would like to mention 2 important projects that Ireland rightly intends to push forward in the coming months: the reform of the medical device legislation and the Biotech Act. Dear Assistant Secretary O'Connor, Ireland and Germany have one crucial thing in common. Both countries are leading medical technologies locations. It is therefore in our best interest that local medcom companies have predictability and streamlined bureaucratic processes. I am therefore pleased that Ireland will prioritize the work on the reform of the medical device legislation. Together, we can strengthen Europe's competitiveness as a location by reducing unnecessary bureaucracy and streamlining procedures, as well as simplifying rules. In addition, we need faster access to innovations and medical devices for the treatment of rare diseases and niche applications, such as for children. At the same time, we must fully ensure the protection of patients and the safety and performance of medical devices. We still have a lot of work ahead of us. I can assure you we will do it our utmost to support the presidency in the best possible way. Also, biotechnology is one of the most important drivers of the European life science industry. To fully utilize the European potential for innovation and expand it internationally, we urgently need to promote and strengthen our biotechnology sector. We are therefore eagerly awaiting the negotiations on the Biotech Act and will continue to be very actively involved. For us, improved legal frameworks for clinical trials with medical products are particularly important. This will enable us to provide early access to innovative therapies and strengthen the EU as a location for clinical trials. Evidently, we must also maintain the highest safety standards in the context of clinical trials. Ladies and gentlemen, the importance of the availability of medical products and medical devices for resilient health systems is undisputable. However, it is no less important to strengthen resilience to health crises. It is crucial to prepare for a wide range of possible scenarios. Unfortunately, this now also extends to health crisis resilience in the event of military conflicts. Therefore, the German Federal Ministry of Health is currently drafting a National Health Security Act. We aim to close the historic gap in the security legislation and prepare our health sector for potential defense-related crisis situations. To name a few keywords, we are dealing with stockpiling, patient transfer, and staff resurface. It goes without saying that we must also coordinate more closely within the EU and internationally and launch coherent measures to prepare for possible crisis situations, including those related to military conflict and defense. Smooth cooperation in EU level is essential, because health crises do not stop at borders. In addition to the European Centre for Disease Prevention and Control, the EU Commission, in particular DG HERA, dear Director General Dr. Fink-Hoyer, but also DG Santé through the Health Security Committee, make a valuable coordinating contribution to this. We therefore strongly support the Commission's initiative to strengthen crisis management at EU level through the revision of the EU Civil Protection Mechanism, while also coordinating across sectors. Prevention, preparedness, and response to health crises are core elements of our work and require adequate financing. This is why Germany supports the stockpiling of medical countermeasures at EU level, in addition to member states' arrangements. These are highly specific medicinal products for rather rare but serious health threats. These could be antidotes to bioterrorism-related hazards or artificial virus derivatives. But there may also be antidotes for outbreaks we do not see coming just yet. When we talk about resilience to health crises, we must always look beyond Europe's borders. The current Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Uganda is a stark reminder that viruses and health threats do not stop at borders, and the effects are tragic and devastating. While we may not be directly affected by the outbreak itself, we do have a role to play in disaster response. Support and solidarity are required now. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the experts and emergency responders who are on the ground in the most affected areas of the Ebola outbreak, providing relief and assistance already today. We should further coordinate EU emergency response measures as effectively as possible and speak with one voice when it comes to safeguarding cross-border health in the EU. The Ebola outbreak once again demonstrates why the EU Global Health Resilience Initiative and the Pandemic Accord will make a significant difference once entering into force. In the coming months, we must therefore reach an agreement on the efficient system of pathogen access and benefit sharing. As EU member states, we have a genuine interest in a balanced compromise which is why we need realistic negotiation corridors and pragmatic solutions for the so-called PEPs Annex. Here too, we shall support the Irish Council presidency. I am confident that, by coordinating closely, we can bring the negotiations to a successful conclusion by May of next year. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by saying resilience requires a strong, competitive health ecosystem in Europe. However, at the end of the day, we must not forget that resilience is all about maintaining good health and preventing future illness. We therefore wholeheartedly support the presidency focus on women's health and cardiovascular health. We must work closely together on all these issues, and I look forward to that. Thank you very much.
Dr. Kibbles, thank you very much for your keynote, and thank you for your assurance to the Irish government of the... You're welcome. Thank you for your assurance to the Irish government of your support for the presidency. I'm sure that's appreciated. And now I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Florica Finkoya. Dr. Finkoya, since 2025, you have been Director General of HERA, but you joined the Commission in 1990, and you have since held a series of high-level posts. Now at HERA, it is your job to ensure that we, the EU and the member states, are ready to act in the face of cross-border health threats. So thank you for your work. And I am really glad that you can now talk to us more about how we should and can build Europe's health resilience and security of supply, since this is such a pressing issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, and excellencies, and ladies and gentlemen. Let me perhaps pick up where Dr. Kibbles ended by saying we had the hantavirus, and we still have the ongoing Ebola outbreak, and they are, in your words, stark reminders that health emergencies are a reality. And in fact, it is true that the health threat landscape is actually becoming more and more complex. We have antimicrobial resistance, we have climate-related risks that are spreading, we now have heat waves which are increasing, also infectious diseases through vector-borne transmissions. We have in Berlin or in Germany, for instance, West Nile fever, not outbreak, but endemic. And we have conflicts that are also increasing the risk of chemical, biological, radiological and nuclear threats. And on top of it, we have geopolitical tensions that are disrupting, as we have already heard, the global health supply chains. So in this context, when we talk about countermeasures, medical countermeasures, we talk about vaccines, we talk about therapeutics, we talk about what we call protective equipment. That can be the gloves, the outfits. When you think about those whom you see now as health workers in Congo, they have their protective equipment, right? So when we think about being ready for these outbreaks, we have to ensure security, resilience, but also competitiveness in being prepared for these future crises. And Europe actually has the strongest pharmaceutical and biotechnology sectors in the world. We forget that, but we have to keep them. And that is why our ecosystem is currently under pressure, because we do have a very fierce global competition for innovation, but also for talents, and for investment, and also for the manufacturing capacity. They try to throw them away. And all this is intensifying, and we cannot afford, honestly, we cannot afford in the current context to lose these critical areas. And that is very much important also for ensuring medical countermeasures are accessible and ready. So Europe must become much more assertive in supporting strategic health emergency technologies and ensuring the availability to protect citizens and safeguard our healthcare systems. But with that also our economies and our societies. And that is precisely the ambition set out in the Preparedness Union and the medical countermeasure strategy we had adopted. I think we heard a lot also about the regulatory framework that needs to be shaped. Let me perhaps come with some complementary other focus on other priorities. And first, I would like to say that we need to be ready to response by continuing investing in structural preparedness. This is really a key component of innovation. We cannot act in a crisis if we haven't structurally prepared it beforehand. And that's why we also have to acknowledge that many vaccines or treatments for health emergencies that are there already or are still coming are still not there. So we have to innovate. We have to really create an environment, an ecosystem that we can produce these countermeasures. And this is why we are investing quite strategically and at scale to de-risk innovation of next-generation vaccines and therapeutics, to advance the development of diagnostics. In the Ebola context, very important to have in diagnostics, but also in the innovative manufacturing capacities and technologies. And that has to be done before the next crisis hits. By the end of 2027, we will have, as HERA, allocated more than 2 billion euros for advanced research and development. So really only for research and development of medical countermeasures. Is that enough? Probably not, but it is important in order to keep certain markets here. And we do so together with the European Investment Bank also, because we are trying in particular to support mid-caps or small and medium-sized enterprises and the startups through a specific dedicated program which called HERA Invest. We also start with new structural components like a vaccines hub, which means we bring together the leading experts, the institutions, the innovators in order to boost discovery of safe and effective vaccine platforms. And now we want to do the same for diagnostics and later for therapeutics. My second point is that we must maintain and strengthen strategic capacity here in Europe. That's very important. You understood that already from my starting remarks. But how can we do this? We have, for instance, created certain approaches to manufacturing. We have what we call a EU FAB, a fabrication network, which secures production capacity in Europe for instance, 325 million vaccines in case of need. We call this ever warm facilities or reservation contracts. They don't come for free, but they are a safety net for us. In case we would need a vaccine, we have to have the capacity for manufacturing it here, or even also have then the right developments beforehand. So these production capacities are our first line of protection in a crisis, because we cannot be dependent on having it imported from a different and perhaps less reliable partner. So this is very important for us. Dr. Kibbles already mentioned stockpiles. Indeed, we have created stockpiles, medical countermeasure stockpiles of worth more than 1.2 billion, which in particular indeed include CBRN antitoxins, as you have mentioned. And these are an essential safety net to complement what, of course, member states would have to do on their own, but we will also further develop it, because often it's niche products which cannot be otherwise kept, and it's very expensive. So all of this is complementary in order to have a European health resilience and enhancing our security of supply. My third point is about preparedness that requires also acting together, especially at EU level, and that brings me to joint procurement. I know this has to be seen in a nuanced way. In Germany we have different approaches, but we work very well together on that, because it is important that all member states, especially also the smaller ones, have access in case of need for medical countermeasures. This is very important because, as it was said, viruses do not know borders. And for Germany, it might not be known, we do not work with, at the federal level, we work with the Länder, because they are part of our joint procurements, in fact. But we need to go further because we have, of course, barriers. And one of the barriers on which we would like to see more progress is the Made in Europe stamp for medical countermeasures. I have to say, as HERA, we can, in our contracts, insist on that where feasible, or at least have the fill and finish in Europe, but it should be something that is also accessible for member states. Fourth is partnerships and public trust, which of course is essential. We have to have diversification, but also stronger cooperation. And I give you one very concrete example, the hantavirus. The public thinks within disembarkation of the passengers, that was it. What really happened is afterwards is that is a deadly virus. We do not have any therapeutics or vaccines for it, and we had patients needed to be treated. We called the Japanese, and they picked up the phone at 10 o'clock at night, their local time, in order to help us to get donations from what we call an investigational therapeutic, which is no longer produced, but they had it. And they brought us also in contact with the manufacturer who then shared some stocks, which we procured directly and then distributed to the patients who really needed that, or needed for, especially in Spain, France, and the Netherlands. So it's just an example that cooperation is important. And I think hadn't we not invested in a very strong cooperation with Japan, with our counterpart in SCADA, I don't know whether we would not have faced export controls. But when I talk about cooperation, that also has to work for the private sector or the industry, because we want to build long-term resilience, and we do work very constructively with industry. We have an industrial cooperation forum. We have our annual now HERA Industry Days. It's end of the year in November. And we also want to have more citizen engagement. That's extremely important because if we do not restore trust, and we all know how much disinformation and destabilization can work hand in hand, we will have perhaps the best countermeasure, but it has to be taken up and accepted by the public. And finally, nothing of these ambitions will be possible, and I'm sorry to say that, especially here in Germany, without sustained investment. But I also listened to Dr. Kippels, who said it already. It is true that we now face, under the Irish presidency, the final very important stretch of what we call the next preparation for the multi-annual framework, financial framework, for the years to come. And there we have to ensure that also for health and health security, we retain resources. Because for us, for instance, we cannot just build a chain of investment, a investment journey, or a end-to-end production if we do not have access to different funding sources, Horizon Europe, Competitiveness Fund, but also then the new fund, which is the UCPM and the Health Emergency Preparedness and Response new instrument. Because we have to go from surveillance, for instance, we here finance the VIA WHO hub in Berlin. It is very crucial for us to know, and not just us, but everybody to know what might be emerging as a threat. So surveillance, threat assessment, gap analysis, very targeted research and development, then building up market access through authorizations, then going potentially through creating markets through purchases, stockpiling, joint procurement, and then we are ready for a response. That's the whole pipeline, and for that we need a continued investment journey. So health preparedness is really a strategic necessity because resilience is not built in a crisis. It is really built beforehand, and it has to be built by design. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fink-Hoyer. Please stay on the stage with me. Okay. And please take a seat. Oh, please take the seat. We talked beforehand where we would like to put Moirish O'Connor, and we decided we put you in our midst.
Thank
you.
Well, so thank you very much, both of you, to your very profound and very enlightening keynotes. You both made it clear why it is so important now to really ramp up the speed on building Europe's health resilience. And maybe I can start our conversation with you, Dr. Finkhoyer. If you look at the current situation, what would you say? How secure is the supply of critical medicines today in Europe, and what has improved compared to 2021 when HERA was founded?
Well, if I were to say it is fine, I would be lying, and I think I would be held accountable when the next thing strikes. But I would say we are much more prepared in having invested in structural preparedness, be it on the development or be it also on the response or the stockpiling, the things that I explained. Why would I also say it? Because there is a good cooperation, and the Hunter virus example is actually quite good. There was a seamless and transparent approach from ECDC, clear protocols, clear recommendations, member states followed them, WHO supported, there was transparency, and then everything went actually quite well, more in the background without people knowing the countermeasures had to come. That was really a challenge, I have to say. But that shows that we are a little bit better prepared than with COVID. We also see now in the Ebola outbreak, it is unfortunately not the first one, it's the 9th one, and it will not be the last one either. But when you see how globally everybody then came together, how we are now coordinating with African CDC and WHO, and of course DRC and Uganda, you can see, be it diagnostics, be it also then the work on a vaccine, which we don't have, is accelerating. It's not there and it will take time, but the structures are better in place and the coordination is doing better. So the glass is half full or half empty. I'm an optimist. I would always say it is half full.
Excellent.
Those glasses are less than half full.
But please,
They're better.
let me know if you want more, and then we, of course, can provide you with more water. Maurice O'Connor, in May, the Trilogue reached an agreement on the Critical Medicines Act. What would you say? What are its most important features, and where would you still see room for improvement from an Irish perspective, let's say?
Well, I think...
Can everybody hear Maurice O'Connor?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sounds good.
The Critical Medicines Act, I think, is part of a very comprehensive modernisation of the EU pharmaceutical regulation, following quickly on the back of the pharma package. And I think it's intended to support sort of strategic autonomy, to bring sort of manufacturing of critical medicines and critical medical ingredients sort of back to Europe, I think, while maintaining connections with international. And I think that's really, really important in terms of the security and the resilience of supply. I think the hantavirus example was really, really impressive. HERA's work, but also the leadership shown by Spain.
Yeah.
And I think the courage, I think that leadership gave to the rest of us in Europe was remarkable. And I think, like most successful sort of security and health measures, it was not just about health, but the coordination across the police and the military and everything. So I think that was really impressive. So the Critical Medicines Act, just a really vital piece of legislation, but part of an overall package, I think, that continues to be progressed in the biotech and in the medical device regulation. So I think it's really important. It critically talks about investments, which I think is the bit. Europe has a very strong foundation in science and in medical research. And I think where we have missed a trick is that a lot of that sort of innovation and breakthroughs has tended to convert into jobs in other parts of the globe from often European-based science. So the Critical Medicines Act provides investment mechanisms and supports to ensure that that is more based in Europe.
You sort of avoided slightly my question, whether there might be any possibilities or room for improvement. And I mean, there are people who say, okay, we would have liked to have seen more effective incentives for manufacturers producing in Europe. You wouldn't agree with that, or?
Oh, I absolutely would. I absolutely would, yeah. And I think that the Biotech Act does recognise the need for sort of the European Investment Bank and others to coordinate as investments in that early stage to go from innovation to manufacturing. And it does deal with the full life cycle of a biopharmaceutical product.
You're also very diplomatic. I stay with the Critical Medicines Act. And Dr. Finkhoyer, you mentioned procurement as essential when dealing with viruses, for instance. And procurement was a sensitive issue during the negotiations around the Critical Medicines Act. What do you think of the outcome now? Is it going to strengthen crisis preparedness sufficiently?
I will be also a little bit diplomatic as concerns procurement, because one could have been more forthcoming. But you have to also think how long it takes to have a new regulation and a new act. So now let's implement it, right? We can endlessly continue and continue, but what we now need is action, and it is providing a foundation for what we already now do for countermeasures like this investment environment and for access to, hopefully, to venture capital or to have more pre-commercial procurement. I give you an example why I think let's use what we have. How is it, the perfect is the enemy of the good, or whatever it's called, but I mean, we have a foundation, let's work with that. But when you look at the list of critical medicine, it's about 200. 80 of that are countermeasures. So we will also take that into account. I mentioned what we have as EU FAB, which are reservation or ever-warm capacities. We have that for manufacturing. We only have that so far, or had it so far, only for vaccines, because I don't know, even globally, everybody is going on vaccines. Where we really have a gap is in therapeutica and diagnostics. So what we were doing now is we tried to pilot. We said we go and pilot for, as I said, more the protective equipment. What we will do probably, if we have a budget next time, is to go for critical medicine that we might need in an armed conflict. Not necessarily as having it now, but having a reservation for plasma, blood, antibiotica, things like that, right? Because here we also have to have incentives to bring back manufacturing or keep certain manufacturing in Europe. So, I mean, I would always say use what we have and try to scale that up.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, procure health, I suppose, healthcare planning and delivery it remains a member state competence. And actually, I noted that even in procurement here in Germany, it's the lender, I think, rather than federal, that often engages in procurement. So I think that remains the case. I think there's huge merit in collective action and coordination in the procurement of medical countermeasures and emergency stockpiles. But I think even more generally, acknowledging and respecting that member states' competence, that procurement is a member state competence, the Biotech Act, the Critical Medicines Act, they do commit to streamlining our processes, coordinating our mechanisms, and creating much greater, I think, ambition in the clinical trials environment. We have an awful lot of clinical expertise and scientific expertise in Europe, I think the strongest on the planet. But we're each operating at member state level. So a lot of this policy in life sciences is to connect and respect each other's scientific expertise so that we can be greater than the sum of our parts. And maybe we can generate sort of more refined understandings of the efficacy of drugs, of new drugs, but also of drugs that we are currently using. And then that can inform and create a kind of a stronger evidence base for procurements by member states, even if we retain that at member state level, which I presume we will.
Mm-hmm. If you can stay with this just for a bit, I mean, obviously, different national approaches could risk to undermine efficiency when we talk about procurement, stockpiling, etc. So, what would you expect from the member states? Does one of you want to answer that?
Well, I can perhaps from the procurement side, because we do joint procurement, but it's a very nuanced approach, right? Indeed, it is, for instance, Germany has SEPI, works super well. We use SEPI very often to do audits also for us, so it is not competition at all. But when you think of joint procurement, for some, it's first of all, it's voluntary.
Okay.
You don't have to do it, except if there's really a health emergency declared at EU level. Then it might be a little bit different. But even then, a member state can or cannot do it, but should not withhold others who want to go ahead. But in normal times like now, it is voluntary. And often we have not everybody on board, but we do have the possibility to have 38 participants, so it goes beyond the 27 member states. Of course, the market power and the bargaining power is very different if you go with such a big mass, because you can get a different price, you can very different conditions, and so on. This is good for Europe as well. I mentioned already made in Europe, and this is where you also have a bargaining power. Now, having said that, I also recognize it depends on the product. Because if you have, for instance, it can be that industry says, it's not good for us because I don't want such a low price. It's never a low price. In medical countermeasures, it's niche products, right? There's not even a market, so the procurement creates a market. But often we also have industry coming to us because administratively they say, oh, it's much easier if I have access to, via one counterpart, to the 38 participants, or at least a part of that. So it's very nuanced, and for instance, in Germany, indeed, it would be the Länder when we had, for instance, pre-pandemic vaccines now. What is it? It is for the precondition for avian flu. So if you think about the workers in poultry farms and so on, that was, for instance, a joint procurement where also the Länder participated. Because it was just easier for them, because it's also preparedness and they have a certain responsibility. I give you another example is with the EIB, we created an antitoxin for ricin. It's called ricin. It's against ricin, which is something which can be used for terrorist attacks. We didn't have any antidotes, so we created that with a startup, Farbentech, together with also the French Armed Forces. Now we have that, but it is only authorized in France. Now, how do you create that market? We now have asked member states whether they would like to have it, and you would be surprised everybody wants to have it, right? Because it's a niche where we had a vulnerability. Now we have that for them to decide whether they want or not. Mpox, which is also smallpox, which you can use in a more armed conflict, it's the same. I mean, this is a niche product. It's quite expensive. Most of these things are very expensive. It's not the normal product you would go and buy in a pharmacy, right? So therefore, sometimes pooling makes sense, and sometimes it doesn't. It's a member state's decision. What I see is in Latin America, we have PAO, which also does it. We have other global players who try to do this because it's quite attractive for their members. And we are also creating what we call workshops on how to exchange best practice. And then we improve or not, it's depending. But it's really a voluntary thing.
Do you want to add something?
I just think in my presentation, I think I mentioned that the COVID pandemic exposed our vulnerabilities. But I also want to say that it also revealed our potential, and the pooling of resource, the collective endeavour, the partnership with industry right across Europe and governments and universities. I think, and research exactly, like developed the leadership in the mRNA vaccine. in digital health, where Ireland, we are not happy where we are in digital health.
Oh, you're in good company.
Yeah, well, I know, but I think we all developed vaccination certificates that were readable right across the 27 member states, and that has, I suppose, given us courage and confidence in what we can do together at European level, and it is that connecting the scientific expertise. And I definitely think we should jointly procure more in areas of critical medicines, but there's so much else that we can do, consistent with the updating of regulations, in connecting our scientific expertise and simplifying. We say, what can member states do? We have to get our act together. Our national life sciences strategy is simply to be ready to be an excellent partner within a more ambitious European vision for life sciences. So even the streamlining of processes, even in different parts of Ireland, different universities will have their own ethics or data protection arrangements, and it's a nightmare for companies. So each member state, I think, has to get their house in order, consistent, aligned with that European vision as set out in the regulation. And I think we really have strong potential.
I'm going to look at it the other way around. The CMA is designed to reduce medicine shortages and to reinforce manufacturing capacity, especially for critical medicines within the EU. Do you maybe see a risk of emerging European protectionism?
That would not suit us in Ireland at all. No, one of the things, say, strategic autonomy is such a priority of the European Union. And I think in Ireland, and perhaps through the experience of Brexit, we had to, I was on a very steep learning curve, but with a big team, we got a very detailed understanding, I would say, for the first time ever, of the source of the medicines that support our health system, that support the health of our population. At the beginning, 70% were either coming from the UK or transporting from Netherlands, Germany, Belgium, Sweden through the UK. So we had a critical vulnerability. But what we learned then, and you've said it, I think people appreciate it now, a lot of the fundamental, most important medicines, antibiotics and steroids and basics, we had driven the price down by driving manufacturing towards India and China. So in Ireland, we also have that bridge to the American sort of pharma industry. And I think what we want to advocate for is an open strategic autonomy, where absolutely Europe strengthens its own sort of self-sufficiency, let's say, in critical medicines, but also cultivates the kind of relationships that led to the phone call to Japan. Canada, Australia, there's many countries that we can develop, hopefully, reliable partnerships with, as well as strengthening. So we're supportive of all that.
Do you want to elaborate a bit more on when it comes to resilience, how much strategic autonomy Europe does need, and where we can rely on smart cooperation with strategic partners outside Europe?
I would fully agree with what Moritz has just said. We will never be totally self-sufficient. It's not even interesting for us to do. It's also probably economically not interested. But you need to ensure a balance. And we just had the Global Resilience, Health Resilience Initiative, which is promoting these cooperations with others. And I must say, without that, we will also not be shielded. It's an illusion. But you need to nevertheless be conscious of the potential supply chain risk. You have to identify that, even when we had Strait of Hormuz now closed. Of course, we have to analyze it. What does it mean? And where else can we get, and you mentioned China, India for the APIs. I mean, this is no rocket science, we know that. But export controls is something which we have to keep in mind. The geopolitical tensions are there. So it's a balancing act, but it would be an illusion, and it would be also wrong to say we only look inward. We have to if we were to have now with Ebola, we will hopefully, I guess, get a vaccine at a certain moment. We work very close, and we have very much supported now financially CEPI, and they work on 3 different types of platforms, right? mRNA is one, and it's probably the one that will be the fastest. It is not excluded, and it shouldn't be excluded, that some of this will be manufactured in Africa, because that's where you have Ebola coming back all the time. But if ever we were in need, we could also then have cooperation back. So it's, I mean, if you think about that, research and development can never ever be only in one place. It's about allowing tech transfers in order to have the possibility to manufacture in different regions or continents. And I think it's that global resilience approach that we have to keep in mind.
Maybe we can talk about the threats you actually prepare for, and you mentioned that in your keynote. And HERA is preparing for a very broad threat landscape, and I really don't want to be alarmist or anything, but having said that, what do you see as the most urgent threat right now? And I'm having in mind Europe's wider security environment, Russia, cyber threats, and so on. How do they reflect in HERA's threat scenarios?
Well, even a taxi driver would ask me if they know where I come from, so I don't do, but I had that. Let's say we work actually with 4 bigger threat scenarios, and let that perhaps be explained. It's pathogens with pandemic potential. That would be either the disease X, or that could be avian flu if it were to mutate from human to human, and we are really looking at that all the time. And that can be other things. That is the first one. Then you have epidemic pathogens for epidemic potential. That would be, as I called, vector-borne diseases, so especially the climate change related diseases like chikungunya, dengue, very much coming up everywhere, also in Europe, or West Nile fever, but also the rodent infectious diseases, as we had with Hunter. Now, then you have antimicrobial resistance, which is a huge problem in Europe as well, and not only in Europe, it's everywhere. And when you speak about Ukraine, this is one of the issues that we saw coming and see on the battlefield. This is a huge problem. And then we have indeed as a 4th threat scenario, armed conflicts, mass casualties, and CBRN, so chemical, biological, radionuclear events. We are not inventing that on our own. It's based on science and evidence, and also and with what ECDC is doing, what others are doing, and what the member states tell us as well. It's not something, it's a dynamic, of course, threat assessment. Now, speaking on the last one, the armed conflict and so on, yes, of course, we have to look at that. And if we look at countermeasures, these are, especially in the CBRN field, for me, these are strategic assets and part of defense. They are actually also, especially of CBRN, part of our deterrence narrative. If we were to say we don't have it, we would be exposed, and we don't have it. We have it, right? Member states have it. We are complementing. We have stockpiles, but it's not just about stockpiles. It's also that we go very deliberately on targeted gaps. We make analysis, and we see what we have to prioritize. You can never go on everything, but when I mentioned, for instance, this new antitoxin against ricin, this was a very targeted, deliberate choice. And we know now there are certain antitoxins or vaccines that are available for smallpox, for antibotulism, anthrax, and so on. But there are others where we also have to keep being very vigilant, and especially in the biosecurity sphere. As we all know, we don't know how this is developing. On chemical, on nuclear, you are a bit more knowledgeable of what you would need. But the Russian war in Ukraine clearly shows us what are the battlefield rounds, how adaptable have to be supply chains, what are the threat scenarios, very dynamic. Of course, we are learning from that, and we are very grateful also for them sharing with us information. But we have member states, especially here in Germany, who are building up also capacities in all member states. That's the whole resilience approach. We will always be complementary, but as I said, certain parts is perhaps easier also to have at European level because it's very specific. And of course, we have to work with the military on that because they develop themselves stockpiles, they develop themselves new research and development. And that is not just, European, it's also in the NATO context. That's part of our mandate.
Yeah, no, thank you for worrying about all those things. Our chief medical officer on the board, and there really is great to know there's expertise on that. But it's so bleak, some of those threats. But they are real. I mean, I think I've spoken about Europe updating all the regulation, and I was speaking earlier about the so what, for our citizens in terms of all the work that we do in EU regulation. And I think the EHDS is something that we really need to bring to ground level. I know Ireland and Germany both probably embarrassed by where we are in digitization. We're worse than Germany. We're at the very,
if you say so.
We're at the very bottom. But we absolutely have legislation in place to create a duty to share, because we made a mess of the GDPR, unlike other countries who were able to roll out digital health under GDPR. And I think that Europe should work with urgency to create, say, a summary care record that is identical right across the 27 member states, so that we can have a foundation for sort of integrated care in our systems. We can mind one another when we're living, working and residing or holidaying in each other's countries. And I think that would be a really tangible benefit. But it's also, and this is the life sciences, it would be the most wonderful foundation for life sciences and research of real scale. Say rare diseases that might be very rare with very few sufferers in Ireland can be connected then with others across Europe to bring real science and real cooperation. So I think that's, when I say that about the so what, I do worry that we move from regulation to regulation and we have to sort of deliver value for European people. Like in terms of resilience and mental health as well. Mental health is really important, and community strength, I think, and that's one of the things Ukraine is showing, in real crisis, but it is really vital. And that kind of summary care record on an app, we could have people volunteering or indicating an interest in participating in European-sponsored research of scale. Most people are really, really happy to contribute to deeper understanding of health conditions that they themselves or their families suffer. So I just think we need to be practical as well as legislative in the European work programme.
Yeah, well, thank you for emphasizing how important it is to have a profound databases. Now you were so humble and you were saying like how bad Ireland is doing in that respect, but on the other hand, you have the presidency now. So talking about the EHDS, what will the presidency prioritize concerning this topic?
It's kind of delivering real value for the EHDS. We will prioritize. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought.
That's fine. Have you got any plans to push forward the EHDS?
Yes. Oh yeah, but say like I think we should set a target date and define the categories of information that we propose to provide in the summary care records, and then develop the technical and information standards. There's a lot of work done since COVID to do this, but I think it needs a political push and a kind of a determination to deliver. So we will have a series of conferences, as well as prioritising the legislation in Brussels, in Dublin, and you're all invited. There'll be a series of conferences to explore how the practical sort of follow through on these things. And for us, we're going to develop a summary care record, but want it to be consistent with what Europe is developing, so that we're a part of a bigger project.
We are nearing the end of our panel, and I actually wanted to ask you both for some kind of closing remarks, looking at the presidency and the coming 6 months. And Dr. Fink-Hoyer, if you could give Maurice O'Connor maybe, let's say, like a piece of homework for the Irish presidency, what would it be to strengthen Europe's resilience and security of supply?
I think when you made your statement in the beginning, the speech, you already had a huge list, very ambitious. And I think every presidency, and the longer it goes, the more is piled up, especially on the regulatory landscape, right? And everybody is looking, as you mentioned already, Biotech Act and other things. From our point of view, and I said it already, so it's not a surprise for him, it would be, and I said it also in my speech, is the work on the MFF, the multi-financial framework, because here this is also a very tall order for the presidency now to make a balancing act between very, very different priorities. But I think it would be very important, and we know that we can count actually on Ireland on this, because when you said competitiveness, values and security, it is also health, right? So we know that you will keep a very attentive eye so to make sure that health and health security is part of that MFF package. Because there might be a tendency to say, we had the panic at the COVID, but now we have the neglect. And as we all have said, also Dr. Kibbles, I mean, the health threats are a reality. It's not that it comes tomorrow. It is already there. Just think about the heat wave. You know, it's just a threat. So investing in health and health security and the architecture and the infrastructure, the medical countermeasures, everything you want, it needs investment. And therefore, for me, it would be the MFF, which I know is one of the thorniest things for every 5 years we have this discussion. And unfortunately, a lot falls under your presidency. But we also know that Ireland, it's not the first time. You have been 8 times already holding the presidency. So your experience, and you're really known as a very honest and a powerful broker. So that's good, because you will have very big member states, otherwise would perhaps be in a much more uncomfortable position. So I know that we can count on you.
Thank you. No pressure.
Well, I don't know if you want to, but maybe if you would, could you, because I mean, you said it and you mentioned your huge agenda and it's very ambitious, but is there like 1 or 2 goals you would say, okay, there we really want to deliver, this is really like we want to get across up until the end of the year?
I think we want to, and not selfishly, but like as Dr. Fink-Hoyer said, health is so central to all of Europe's priorities. I think we want to, and again, you're talking MFF, and it's not just the European budget, but budgets at national level are under severe pressure. And we want Europe, like at European level and at national level, to understand that investment in health and population health is absolutely central. And that it's not just good for people to be healthy, but it's good for all the ambitions we have as Europe. As I say, with a digitized health service, with consistent data across Europe, we could be an absolute powerhouse for clinical trials and coordination. So, I mean, as you say, the agenda is hugely broad already, and in a way, we need to do some of what we have already committed to while rolling forward with the sort of updated legislation. So that's our priority, to be relevant, to people at ground level and to keep them healthy and well.
Irish O'Connor, Dr. Florica Fink-Hoyer, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please
Thank you.
give a big round of applause.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Please take a seat, but please don't go away. When we will shortly move on to the second discussion for this evening, please, if you would like to join the conversation again at any point, please just feel free to do so. But right now, we want to know what you think, dear guests, here at the Tagesspiegel and also in the live stream. We have prepared 3 questions in Slido, and we would like to ask for your opinion. Here we go. You can see the QR code there on the screen behind me. You are now actually encouraged to take out your phones and scan the QR code. I can step away. Do you? I can sit down. So I hope everybody gets the code, and I will stand up again. And once you're there, on the Slido page, please select the tab that says Polls, and you will see the first question. And in total, there will be 3 questions, and you can answer them one after another. And to our viewers in the live stream, you should see a tab Polls as well, next to the tab for the questions you want to ask us. So now we have the first question, and I read it to you. Europe is often seen as falling behind the US and China in biotech innovation. Do you think the EU is doing enough to catch up? Yes, the EU is on the right track. It's trying, but not fast enough. Or no, Europe is losing the race. So I'm curious whether we have already your answers, whether we can see them. If we do, we will shortly see them here on the screen. Wow. Okay, well, 53, but the majority definitely says it's trying, but not fast enough. There is 1/3 of you who is actually pessimistic and says, no, Europe is losing the race. And only 15% who say, well, Europe is on the right track. 15, it's getting less and less. Well, yeah, but trying but not fast enough, this is something one can work with, I think. Okay, now let's move to the second question, which is what should an EU Biotech Act primarily achieve? Strengthen research and innovation, accelerate approvals and procedures, bring production back to Europe, or promote investment and startups? Well, you have to make a decision. Maybe unfortunately, we have not all of them, all of the above. So you got to decide, and if you have made your decision, we can see your answers. But I guess you're still thinking. Or do we have a result? We have a result. All right. Yeah. So it's quite evenly not divided, but the different answers are. You take everything rather important, but promote investment and startups is the front runner, and accelerate approvals and procedures second. So we'll see in the discussion whether this is actually done. And let's move to the third question. If we can have it, please, the third question. Thank you. What is currently the biggest obstacle holding back Europe as a biotech hub? Is it too much regulation? Is it because procedures are too slow, too little capital for growth, or too little alignment between research and the market? Again, you have to make a decision. And you have made one. Too much regulation. Well, sounds familiar. Too little capital for growth. And procedures that are too slow, only 7%. That's interesting. Well, great. Thank you very much for these really interesting results and these great incentives for our next discussion on life science innovation and Europe as a biotech hub. 2 further keynotes will take us deeper into the topic. And please give a warm round of applause now to our first keynote speaker, Professor Veronika von Messling. Professor Messling, you are the Director General of Health and Life Sciences Division at the German Federal Ministry of Research, Technology and Space, which is not funny at all. You have had a distinguished international career with many high-level positions, so you know the international research landscape really well. Therefore, we're very much looking forward to hearing your thoughts on how Europe's life science can be strengthened through the EU Biotech Act and what Germany can contribute to that. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. And actually, while I was listening to the other speakers, I was thinking, well, what am I going to say now? Because a lot of the points have already been made. And let me maybe contribute the research perspective on that. And this is that we are in a really challenging time at the moment. I think that's very obvious, has been pointed out. But we are also at a really, really exciting time at the moment when we're looking at health research progress. And I cannot mention that often enough. A few weeks back, there was a cancer conference in the States, and 3 breakthrough innovations were presented there for diseases that had been a death sentence only a few years back, including pancreatic cancer. And when I read this on the news, I was like, how can this possibly be? And I think there's more to come. And the big question is, how do we actually make sure we deliver this, as Secretary O'Connor said, to us, to our citizens and to all of us? How do we make sure we get access? And so how do we make sure that our exciting research discoveries that we make here in Europe actually make it into things that are available to us and that make our life better and that make sure that we can participate at life at the fullest? And so looking at this Biotech Act from that perspective, it actually has huge potential to provide a framework that catalyzes this journey towards, from the exciting discovery towards the actual use to all of us. And since I'm going to speak about how Germany looks at this, let me tell you that that is exactly why we started to develop this high-tech agenda Germany, to really think about this as a journey and to think about there's this discovery and how do we make sure that this discovery goes through all the development stages and ultimately becomes useful to all of us. And then when we look at the interplay between our national activities and the European Union activities, it becomes obvious that it's really important that this goes hand in hand and that we think about how can we essentially provide those connection points with the EU initiatives, because what the EU gives us is the leverage of the market, but also the leverage of bringing research together across all the different disciplines and across all the expertises that we actually need for this little kind of embryonic discovery to become this research, this healthcare delivery item that we then benefit from. So let me just mention a few things that in our health biotech roadmap fit almost perfectly to this Biotech Act, one of which is our flagship project for gene and cell therapy, where we are providing this space to de-risk and to provide the proof of concept of new gene and cell therapy discoveries, and to essentially bring them to the point where some biotech company then feels that this is what I want to have in my portfolio. Because it is painfully clear for health research that no government, not even the EU, will be able to cover the entire value chain and development chain for medical development. So what we need to do is to make this discovery so attractive, so to de-risk it, to show it works, to show we can produce it, that ultimately this is going to be the jewel in the portfolio of some of our pharmaceutical companies who are looking for those jewels. And so our job is to make sure there's a match. And the Biotech Act gives us that opportunity on multiple levels to make sure that we don't miss any jewels. Another thing that we see is, and was mentioned, is the whole digitization aspect. That will allow us to move much faster from an idea to a discovery to a product in ways that we don't even think about. And so these things will ultimately help us to make the best of what we have. And what we have is really, really good. And so I hope that soon, when we do this beautiful questionnaire, it's not going to be like, yeah, but we're kind of slow, but rather, oh, yes, we're actually doing it, and we can get even better at it. And so with that, thank you.
Thank you, Professor von Wessling, for this optimistic and forward approach. That's great. And now please welcome Thomas van Kang, Deputy Head of Unit DG Santé, European Commission. Mr. van Kang, I hope you don't mind me saying so, but in a way you're the architect of the aforementioned Biotech Act. So it's therefore truly wonderful to have you here and to hear from you more about the legislation and how it actually is intended to deliver a competitive advantage for Europe's biotech sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do mind a bit because it's really a small role I played in a big team of people. But thanks. And imagine it's even harder to come after you now, but okay. Good evening, and thanks for the invitation. Thanks also for the choice of a title, because that's spot on in terms of what we aim to achieve with the Biotech Act, to really turn this ambition that we all should and must have about biotech in Europe into concrete results. And we try to do that in this proposal for a Biotech Act in at least two ways. The first one is we try to put in this text, that I hope you all read, measures that have a real, very concrete and tangible impact on the ground. That was a very strong political instruction from our health commissioner, so I think you would get along with him, I'm sure, to have measures that really are very concrete and make a big difference once implemented. The second way, I think, and you also alluded to that, is that we try to address the whole biotech ecosystem. We do regulatory simplification, access to capital, infrastructure projects. We go through the whole value chain from clinical research down to biomanufacturing. So we really try to boost the ecosystem in the broad sense. So to do that, like we do for all legislative proposals, we had conducted a broad consultation of stakeholders. It was open to anybody and everybody. We gathered a lot of input. I'll spare you the specifics. I can do that later in the discussion if you want. But essentially, I think we had two types of comments. The first group is Europe is really very complex and therefore very, very slow if you compare to China, the US. Or Europe is sometimes too fragmented, so we're too small if you compare to the US or China. So you could say, yes, that's the sad story of many tech sectors in Europe that we're pushing away. Yes and no. No for at least two reasons. First, biotech has a very specific risk profile. That means you can have very specific measures to address biotech. You know, like the latency, the time it takes from the moment you innovate until you actually generate revenue from that innovation. It's easily 8 to 10 years, sometimes 15. The risk of failure, you mentioned cell and gene. I think in some areas you are at 2-3% from preclinical stage where you have a molecule that might be interesting until commercialization. So 2-3% chance of success. And then the investment you need before you even know whether you will have a viable product to run your clinical trials, 30-50 million, sometimes in the hundreds. So all these elements are quite niche to health biotech and mean you can actually adopt measures that are quite specific to address these issues. And the second reason, I think you heard it tonight already, is that I mean, we're not talking about subsidizing a dying sector. I mean, it is a crown jewel of Europe. We have everything to be competitive there. We have the best science. We have the best scientists. I accompanied my boss last week to BIO, which is the big annual convention on biotech in San Diego. We had the privilege of visiting an incubator where a nice big pharma hosts promising talents. And I think we were all surprised and a bit, unpleasantly surprised by the fact that more than half of them were European startup CEOs that had moved there, basically. So just to say, I mean, we also were in the Parliament earlier this week for one of the first discussions on the Parliament's position on what this Biotech Act should do. And it's not always the case, I think, of course, there are diverging views on how we go about it, but there was such a consensus, or even a unanimity, on the fact that we need to act now, and we need to act boldly, because we cannot just sit and watch our biotech, our European biotech, drift away. I mean, that just sitting and waiting would be like scoring an own goal, in a way, if we may do a football comparisons here. Still early. I'm Belgian, we were very lucky, so our turn will come. But I mean, basically, I think the momentum is so much clearly there. What we put in this proposal, and I'm happy to discuss in more detail, but it's really all this regulatory simplification aspect to reduce this time to market. I think we're amending 7 pieces of legislation to really try and simplify things without ever lowering the standards we have in the EU. The industry itself is very pleased to have this label from the European Medicines Agency. It's a sign of quality. We certainly want to keep that. A second block of measures is on the access to capital, precisely to keep our startups and scale-ups growing here. They can do that, and they should. And the third basket of measures is really more industrial policy elements, ranging from incentives on IP to some broader strategic projects, some measures on the use of data and AI through the life cycle of medicines. And I think you really have to look at this whole Biotech Act as a coherent construct. And talking about what we expect, I think if we get it right, I think basically the idea is that choosing Europe is basically the obvious choice if you're in biotech. Thank you. Happy to discuss.
Thank you very much. And please stay with me, Mr. Fangang. Please take a seat. You can choose. Yeah, take that one. Great. And yeah, Professor von Messling, please come back again. And let me also welcome Christian Tans to the discussion. Please come here.
Thank you.
Mr. Tans, you're Head of Government Affairs and Policy at Johnson & Johnson Germany. And yeah, thank you very much for being with us here tonight, because you are actually going to provide the point of view of the industry, which is expected to scale up production in Europe. So I think it's great that you're here as well now on the panel.
Thank you.
And dear guests, you are now actually also allowed to ask questions if you want to. Just a caveat, please raise your hands and wait until you have the microphone. And then please introduce yourself and keep to just one short question, please. Thank you. All right. Mr. Van Kang, maybe I just come back to what you just said before. And would you like to just tell us briefly, what do you think are the 2 most important parts about the legislation that will make the European biosector more competitive, if they are introduced as of now?
I mean, I can single out a few, but I think we spoke about this regulatory simplification, so going faster, streamlining without lowering standards. I think you mentioned them. We are trying to simplify the clinical trials regulation, big way, I think, because doing multi-country trials in the EU is not always as straightforward as it could be. While it is, I mean, it is an important step in your product development, and we're trying to really accelerate the timelines where there was duplications, where there were gaps. We're trying to have a more European approach in the sense that previously you would have every member state authorizing a clinical trial. There we propose to have one reporting member state taking the lead, so we no longer go at the speed of the slowest, but we just move forward. A lot of measures, like a single core dossier for clinical trials, in the sense that you submit once. When you submit for something that has already, in a similar form, been submitted, you can reuse 80% of the file. I mean, a lot of efficiency gains in clinical trials that I think can make a big difference. Also downstream in the chain. Again, we mentioned biomanufacturing, but I think it's a highlight, and I think we're very pleased, by the way, that Ireland decided to start its presidency by trying to make quick progress already now in July on the topic of clinical trials in the Biotech Act. Second one, for me, and talking with these young entrepreneurs in San Diego, the access to capital, we're really far from being a champion. It goes way beyond the Biotech Act. I think there are many initiatives being taken into the Savings and Investment Union, but yeah, the fact that we have a fragmented capital market that is not deep and liquid enough so that you can raise the funds you need and attract risk-tolerant capital, because yes, it is a risky business, I mentioned, but a high risk return potential. I think there, if we can progress, we can also do a lot of good to have a thriving ecosystem. And also because, overly simplistically, if you're the most competitive, you don't need to be protected. I mean, you're the one producing for yourself and the world, simplifying a bit. So there's so much to gain. It's not about industry profit, I think, like we hear sometimes. Competitiveness has a lot of societal advantages from health or security. But I think, yeah, if we can get this right, and I think these two items would be already big way success.
You mentioned clinical trials, and we have one question coming in from Slido. So let me just add, you can ask questions via Slido as well, of course. And I just want to get this, I want to take this question because it is related to clinical trials. And a person which doesn't mention his or her name asks, what is your assessment of the US Operation Trailblazer to restore American leadership in clinical trials? Will Europe continue to fall behind the US regardless of Europe's Biotech Act?
So they announced it last week when we were in San Diego. We had the FDA presenting, and it was surprising how much you hear things basically that we are proposing in the Biotech Act. And more broadly, in this convention that is always in the US this year, there was a lot of interest on what is it that you're doing in Europe, what's happening exactly, for a whole set of reasons. But I think there is genuine curiosity about what's happening on this side. So Trailblazer we looked at, I think there's a lot of ideas that were wrapped together. I mean, it was a bit Macari, the former FDA boss project, but you find many elements that are very, I mean, accelerating timelines, opening to novel approach methodologies. I mean, all the ingredients that I think we also have in the Biotech Act, you find them there. I think it shows that, yes, there is a global race on biotech, that people are also looking at China, and that sitting still is basically is not an option. But, yeah.
Okay, so not too frightened.
I mean, from what I've read, it looks very similar to what we're doing. I mean, so the proof is in the pudding. Same thing for our clinical trial regulation. Now it's a piece of text. Let's see in practice how much faster we go with our clinical trials. But in the council discussion, in the parliament, it's not on every file that you feel this momentum and this shared sense of urgency. I think sometimes people want you to lay back and chill. Here, nobody does.
All right, okay. Professor von Messling, I mean, you talked about that before, and it was mentioned several times that actually the research in the biotech sector is really undisputedly world-class here in Europe. And on the first panel, we talked about how brilliant it worked actually during COVID. And COVID is just a few years ago. So what would you say has changed, or how could the Biotech Act prepare an environment which makes such developments as just a few years ago possible again?
I have to say that the 800-pound gorilla in the room is the money, right? So it is indeed the question, how to mobilize at-risk funding, because at the moment we still have a situation, a huge level of attrition. And there are multiple things that we can do to make sure we don't have attrition, because the transitions between the original discoverer and then entities and individuals who are interested in developing are smooth, that we make sure that we de-risk in a reasonable way so that companies can actually evaluate the value and the potential of the discovery. But ultimately, it is about making money available when you need it to do this de-risking and to do these proof of concepts and to demonstrate the potential. I think one game changer is the modeling, is the data. Because a lot of what we are now doing empirically by experiments, which is costing a lot of money, we may be able, sooner than all of us believe, to do virtually, to do in the in a digital system, and that means the cost drops and the time drops. And so one thing that we do in parallel to looking at those transition points and trying to tackle the money question is really push on Europe's strength in that area of digital development. A lot of our startups, a lot of our researchers are really, really strong at this interface between artificial intelligence and health. And so if we are able to essentially leapfrog there, we might actually be able to address some of the problems that plague medical product development essentially through the back door. But that's a research point of view, right? So researchers always look like further ahead. And so at this moment, the big difference and the big challenge really is to mobilize at-risk funding to de-risk and provide proof of concept of developments and accepting that a lot of them fail.
Christian Tam, what would be necessary for Johnson & Johnson to relocate more research and development as well as production to Europe? And does the Biotech Act deliver in that context?
Let me answer the second part of the question first, because I think that's really important, what Thomas von Kang said. I mean, this is a really strong signal to industry and researchers across Europe that the European Union and the member states want to do something. We've seen some mixed signals over the years with some of the EU Commission's proposals, for example, but I think the Biotech Act is really the important signal to show we want to move ahead and we want to really encourage industry to be competitive in Europe. And the industry fully supports this, full stop. Because what we see in Europe is that we have a lot of world-class research institutions and so on. And the problem is not that we do not have the kind of innovative mindset. The problem is the translation into business, basically, the competitiveness part. And Professor von Messling also alluded to this. So I think this is like really important that the European Union and member states work together, because the kind of speed, as you mentioned, both mentioned before, it needs to be faster. It needs to be more simplified, because right now it's often complicated. You've got the European Union, you've got the member states, and sometimes the regions and even communities being involved. So I think the streamlining is really important, especially for startups that really want to move fast. And then how you interact in this kind of whole system, because you mentioned the pharma package, the EHDS and other things. And I think it's really, this is an important building stone to make industry and consider Europe more, because what we've seen, and you alluded to this, Thomas, is basically Europe has been falling behind compared to other regions in the world, especially the US and China. So this is like really the important part, that the signal is there. If you really want to get more investment into especially research and into the funding of companies, for example, from J&J and other players in the market, even financial institutions, I think implementation is now key. It's like really, it has to be implemented, and it has to be ambitious as well, because what we see is really good, but if you see how big the gap has become to other regions, I mean, there has to be more ambition as well to say, like, this is an important step, but there will be more steps following. And this is like really what we need to see, and what the industry and all the different stakeholders in the industries need to see, and there needs to be action, because it has to be tangible as well, so we can invest more. The signal is good, the implementation is also very important.
Yeah, maybe we can have the slide for the first question again and have a look at, because we are talking so much about US and China, and whether Europe can actually catch up or not. And I want to stick a bit to investment, and I want to add some figures to that. I mean, I'm sure you all know them. I just repeat it again. If we talk about venture capital, only 7% of global venture capital is invested right now in the EU. And in the US, it is 63%, which is much more. And in China, it's 14%, so it's also more. So how is the legislation supposed to make it interesting to invest in Europe?
Me?
Yes.
Okay. Again, I think we have a bit of a toolbox in there. One important element in the proposal, and that is the object of many discussions, is the incentive based on intellectual property. So, to put it simply, we propose to extend patents, special type, by 1 year, basically, for very innovative products. But, and it's a big but, it's not a gift to industry. It's very strict criteria attached two types of criteria. The first two is that for the patient, it has to be a genuine innovation, not just another Me Too, like we call them, but a true novel mode of action, and a true new therapeutic area that is being opened by a breakthrough innovation. That's the first set of criteria. The second is that you actually need to conduct your clinical trials at least partly in the EU and to partly manufacture in the EU. So there's no free lunch. That's a way of attracting reshoring. And it's true, you were saying maybe not so much through protectionism, but more with incentives, more with carrots. Another thing that we are doing more for the smaller players is working with the EIB group, so the European Investment Bank and the European Investment Fund, to build what is called currently an investment pilot. So it's a set of financial instruments that are really tailored to these specific risk profiles of biotech that we mentioned at the beginning, so that it can be used to crowd in as much private capital, risk-tolerant capital as possible. Because again, we're not going to fund biotech with public money, but with the bank, they have expertise in life sciences. There are ways to design equity products or special types of loans in such a way that you can basically send a good signal to the private sector that it's worth taking the risk, and they can then join, and that can also have a very significant impact in terms of investment in the EU in biotech.
Mm-hmm. I have another question, but just a short follow-up on you. Are you convinced by that?
You mean by the efforts of the European Commission?
By what Thomas van Kang just elaborated on, how investment would be more attractive in the EU.
Yes, I think it's a good first step. I mean, definitely. I mean, it will take some time, clearly, but I'm also not a pessimist here. I'm also optimist and very close to Professor van Messling, because this, I mean, the whole biotech innovation ecosystem is a global one. I mean, this is like really globally. There is competition, and good competition, around ideas, for example, around business ideas. And it's not like, okay, this is the status we have now and this will stay forever. I mean, if you do changes, policy changes, and we've seen this in other regions in the world, also in EU member states, you can move things, you can get more investment, more research, and faster access to market and to patient, basically. I mean, this is like really important, because it's a policy decision, and this is why it's so important that the signal is coming, because also one thing you should not forget, it's a very fast evolving landscape, but as you pointed out, it's a high-risk business. We are researching for a long time. It takes a long time to develop, actually, medicines. So we need also predictability, and I think this kind of like balance between the speed and the agility and the predictability, that's quite important.
I have a question from a person again who doesn't say whether who or what her name is or his name. One of the reasons why so many European companies are starting in the US is the size of the market. The US market makes way more than half of the global market for innovative pharmaceuticals, while Europe is around 15 to 25% only. What could EU member states and Germany do to address this issue? Professor von Messling, any ideas?
There's an easy answer. That's a different ministry. But let me say that I think we had a discussion already. So the question of the procurement being in the hands of the Länder or of the national states, that's an advantage in many ways, but in some ways it's a disadvantage when we talk about purchasing power. And so I think moving forward, this is going to be an ongoing discussion, how to maybe deal with this in a way that is advantageous to us to attract these new developments. And to make sure that companies have incentives to offer their products in Europe. I think we shouldn't underestimate, though, that because we have health care, and I think that was a really important point, in Europe, access to health care is considered a fundamental right of each European citizen. And so that also makes quite a market power that should not be underestimated. And I think we see this again and again, that is a big pull, because you know that especially combined with public health measures, there is some predictability there. You will be able to sell your product because it's part of a public health plan in a country, and so there's many ways that make market attractive to companies.
I'm asked to wrap up the discussion, which I'm going to do, but maybe we could have the slide for question number 3 again, just for a short one. It's about the biggest obstacle we face. And what maybe for a last round, I would like to ask first you, Mr. van Tarms. We talked about funding, and we talked about clinical trials, about regulation, how to make things less complicated. And I was just wondering, what are there other measures you would say which are really have to be kept in mind or really have to stay into the legislation that the Biotech Act will be actually successful in the end?
Yes, and I'll keep hammering that point, but because I really think the different parts are closely interconnected. So to build on what you mentioned and this idea of proof of concept, one thing we've heard a lot, and we can see if you look at the data, but I mean, sometimes we set up startups maybe too soon, whereas in other places they would be longer in academia before becoming a spin-off, and you're such a small bird in a way that it's even too risky to invest. So I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do. So one important thing beyond the access to capital for these companies is to actually be able to have access, for instance, to pilot facilities for biomanufacturing, where this academic spin-off basically can go and try see whether this academic invention has industrial scalability. And if it does, then it can have a good proof of concept to go to the venture capitalist to tell them that indeed it's very risky, but you're an investor, you can discount future cash flows. This is actually quite promising in terms of investment. So the biomanufacturing angle, for instance, that we didn't touch at all, which is quite important through strategic projects in Europe, where I think Ireland, for instance, has very good practices to show and some excellent facilities. I think we heard so many times that we need more of these basically in the EU, or more access to these. And again, because it is linked to then the regulatory and the access to capital, I would maybe pick the biomanufacturing capacity and these pilot facilities, for instance, to be specific.
Christian Tarms, you said before that the industry actually really supports the Biotech Act. Having said that, I mean, are there changes you would suggest which should be made, or are there other things you would say they truly need to stay in the legislation when it's going to be adopted?
I think the content of the legislation is like really important, and we touched upon digital and AI, for example. I mean, this is also very important because this is a new area of health research and also the kind of like biotech industry that is coming. So in Europe, it's not only a big market, we have like really leading institutions there, a lot of researchers there, and we have a huge population also with the data we can work with. So I think being in the Act is like really important, and combining this with the AI Act and EHDS is also like really super important. So we have this kind of ecosystem to work on that one. The point I would repeat is like basically, let's be more ambitious on this. I mean, we still have the ongoing discussions, and I'm really glad that the Irish presidency will pick this up and drive this forward, because Ireland is known for its competitive drive. So like, where can we be even more ambitious than in the legislation? Because the legislation can be changed, and I think it's really important that Europe does the best it can right now to really achieve more than you even think of. And so I think the call to action from the industry is basically to policymakers: be more ambitious, like really big, think big, because it's an important industry for citizens, for the economy, for society. There's a lot of potential, and we can do a lot, but we just have to unlock this.
Thank you. Frau von Messling, maybe just really one quick answer. Do you have like one measure, how you would measure the success of the Biotech Act in like 5 years, when we look at, I don't know, specific numbers of, let's say, approved medicines? Is that possible? Can we measure it like that?
Absolutely. It's a tough measure, but we can. I think the number of clinical trials is a good, maybe in between measure. You know, I think the number of developments that have moved into proof of concept, that have taken advantage of the EIB funding, that we have been able to move from the national funding into this European funding. There is the European Competitiveness Fund. There is a lot of interesting developments that if we are smart and we put the puzzle pieces together in a smart way, we can really measure then how many products did make it from our national funding into, let's say, the competitiveness fund or into an EIB funding. And so I think we love to count and measure, so I'm sure we'll come up with a number of really cool things to count. Let's just see if it actually arrives for us, Yeah.
Now I have a last one again for you. Sorry, but if people can ask questions in Slido, I really want to take them. And it's from Martina Karst, and she wants to ask, and she asks you specifically, does the German strategy of gene and cell therapy somehow link the ambitions of the Ministry of Health and your ministry to efficiently support the strategic goals of the EU Biotech Act, as Germany is one of the biggest players in the EU?
I think this is a perfect example for just that, where we have invested in the kind of a foundry where ideas can be tested and where we can check, is it true? Can it be produced? Does it actually do what we think it does? And then move it forward towards with the help of, or taking advantage of the tools that the Biotech Act gives us towards product development. And I know that my colleagues in the Ministry of Health are thinking about how can we make sure that our system can pay for it, how can we make sure that the clinical trials are happening in Germany, in Europe. And so this is a really perfect example on how this goes hand in hand.
Great, thank you very much, Professor von Messling, Thomas van Kank, Christian Tams. Thank you very much for your time, for your insights. It's great. It's your applause. We are now, as you're aware, nearing the end of the official part of tonight's event, and it is a great honor that Dr. Stefan Koch will wrap up tonight's presidency talk for us. Please join us on the stage. Dr. Koch, you are CEO of the Klosterfrau Group, and you are chair of the Brussels regional chapter of Pharma Deutschland. And I'm grateful that you wrap up tonight's discussion for us, and we're looking forward to your thoughts.
Thank you so much. I hope I can read everything what I read down here. It's not so easy. Yeah, exactly. So I've been asked to wrap up today's meeting, and I was told not to make it too long and be quick and dirty. So I try to do my best. And before I summarize briefly this exciting evening, first, I want to say thank you to the Tagesspiegel and to the team here who organized it. It was brilliant. Thanks to all of you. And of course, thanks, to Ruth Zissinger. Nobody says thank you for hosting us. It was really perfect. Yeah, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, strength through unity is the motto of the Irish Presidency of the Council, and the goal has been clearly stated as promoting Europe's economic strength. We have such a motto and such a goal been, when have such a motto and such a goal been more fitting than they are today? And not only COVID has shown that we need, without any doubts, a strong and resilient pharmaceutical industry in Europe. Tonight's discussion has shown that Europe's health agenda is increasingly shaped by global developments. Several important debates are unfolding at the same time. The international discussions around supply, clinical trials, and especially pharmaceutical pricing, especially the American MFN scheme. The debate on healthcare financing in Germany, and Europe's efforts to create a regulatory framework that strengthens innovation and competitiveness. Having said this, today we had the unique opportunity to listen to some brilliant speeches and discussions. Dorothy Brackmann opened the evening tonight. She was mentioning that we are facing challenges, especially from the US and from China. And she was immediately answered by Maurice O'Connor. He told us that strength comes from working together. And he pointed out that Europe must be a place where innovation can happen again. Dr. Georg Kippels remembered us on the importance of supply and strong resilience supply chains, and to be prepared for crisis. Dr. Florika Fink-Hoyer agreed on that, and she added that we have to invest in structural environment. And a second point, she pointed out that we must build and maintain strategic production capacity in Europe. This was a very strong message from my perspective. We produce in Germany. Professor Veronika von Messling, she remembered us on the health research progress, like the new cancer products. And to me, it's very important because we do not talk on good news. So thank you for telling us some good news. And she sharpened us our view on the opportunity of the Biotech Act. This was a perfect bridge to Thomas von Kank, the architect of the Biotech Act. He described what the Biotech Act showed, and the momentum is on us. Finally, these discussions are not happening in isolation. They influence one another. This is why competitiveness and health policy cannot be thought in silos. The challenge for Europe is therefore to ensure that these different policy areas reinforce rather than contradict one another. The discussions today have reminded us that resilience, innovation, competitiveness, and healthcare are not competing priorities. They're interconnected. In an increasingly global environment, Europe's strength will depend on its ability to connect these debates and create policies that are coherent, forward-looking, and internationally competitive. I hope that the Irish presidency will succeed in laying the groundwork for a future in which Europe returns to a leading, innovative, and stable pharmaceutical industry policy. And this is my dear hope for all of us, because we need a strong pharmaceutical industry. Thanks a lot, and yeah, I will hand it over.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Koch, for your very warm and thoughtful remarks. Thank you, and I promise I'm not going to keep you very much longer from refreshments and drinks. I just want to make sure that you all save the date yet for our next event. So please mark in your calendars April the 8th, 2027, because then we will have the next Health4EU conference in the Bolle-Säle in Berlin. And now, my truly last remaining remark and task for tonight is to thank you, dear speakers, dear guests, dear partners. Thank you very much for your time and for your interest. And thank you very much to my amazing colleagues who made this event possible and who have organized it in a really great way. You all have made this a wonderful and rewarding exchange, and I wish you a very pleasant evening now and later a safe journey home. Thank you very much.